Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome back from out there, wherever you are, to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, where we get a rare opportunity to hear directly from a liberated soul, Srila Prabhupada, his actual thoughts and train of thought for at least an hour every single day, and become purified by that association. Taste the ecstasy of a pure devotee glorifying the Supreme Lord and exhibiting the philosophy and the science of Krishna consciousness, so that we can know, how to think, how to feel, how to will, and how to act in devotional service, so that we'll be safe and secure and happy in this life, and then go back to Godhead when we leave our bodies. So the Srimad-Bhagavatam is what we're reading. We're going to, when we finish this, which is going to take some time, it's a very big book, we're going to do the Bhagavad Gita again, then we're going to do the Chaitanya Charitamrita all the way through, then maybe we're going to do Briya Bhagavatamrita. Let's see, if I live long enough, by the mercy of all the Vaishnavas. Hare Krishna. Okay, Sanatana Goswami glorified the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and if we listen closely every day, it helps us to go deeper and to understand more about what we're doing. It goes like this. Sarva Shastabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidvandurita Ditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshaksharayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who is supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Shri Krishna himself. Marikabando Matsangin Madguro Mad Mahadana Manistadagamad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Saduta Dayin Atini Chochata Kada Hanamun Jagadachin Mam Prem Narit Katayos Buddha. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, we've reached the 4th chapter of the 8th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, moving right along towards Goloka Vrindavan. Gajendra returns to the spiritual world. The last few days we've heard the wonderful prayers that Gajendra, the king of the elephants, offered to Krishna just at the most crucial time of his life, when he was about to be killed by the crocodile. Okay, this 4th chapter describes the previous birth of Gajendra and the crocodile. It tells how the crocodile became a Gandharva and how Gajendra became an associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There was once a king on the Gandharva planet whose name was Huhu. Once this king Huhu was enjoying with women in the water, and while enjoying, he pulled the leg of Devala Rishi, who was also taking a bath in the water. Upon this, the great sage became very angry and immediately cursed him to become a crocodile. You gotta be careful how you treat sages. King Hu was very sorry when he was cursed in that way, and he begged pardon from the sage, who in compassion gave him the benediction that he would be freed when Gajendra was delivered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus the crocodile was delivered when killed by Narayana. When Gajendra, by the mercy of the Lord, became one of the Lord's associates in Vaikuntha, he got 4 hands. This achievement is called Sarupya Mukti, or the liberation of receiving a spiritual body exactly like that of Narayana. Gajendra, in his previous birth, had been a great devotee of Lord Vishnu. His name was Indradyumna, and he was the king of the Tamil country. Following the Vedic principles, this king retired from family life and constructed a small cottage in the Malayachala hills, where he always worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead in silence. Agastya Rishi, along with many disciples, once approached King Indradyumna's ashram, but because the king was meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he did not receive Agastya Rishi properly. Thus the Rishi became very angry and cursed the king to become a dull elephant. In accordance with this curse, the king was born as an elephant, and he forgot all about his previous activities in devotional service. Nonetheless, in his birth as an elephant, when he was dangerously attacked by the crocodile, he remembered his past life in devotional service and remembered a prayer he had learned in that life. Because of this prayer, he again received the mercy of the Lord. Thus he was immediately delivered, and he became one of the Lord's 4-handed associates. Shukadev Goswami ends this chapter by describing the good fortune of the elephant. Shukadev Goswami says that by hearing the narration of Gajendra's deliverance, one can also get the opportunity to be delivered. Shukadev Goswami vividly describes this, and thus the chapter ends. Text 1. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, when the Lord delivered Gajendra, king of the elephants, all the demigods, sages, and Gandharvas, headed by Brahma and Shiva, praised this activity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and showered flowers upon both the Lord and Gajendra. Purport. It is evident from this chapter that great sages like Devala Rishi, Narada Muni, and Agastya Muni will sometimes curse someone. The curse of such a personality, however, is in fact a benediction. Both the crocodile, who had been a Gandharva in its previous life, and Gajendra, who had been a king named Indradyumna, were cursed, but both of them benefited. Indradyumna, in his birth as an elephant, attained salvation and became a personal associate of the Lord in Vaikuntha, and the crocodile regained his status as a Gandharva. We find evidence in many places that the curse of a great saint or devotee is not a curse, but a benediction. Text 2. There was a beating of kettle drums in the heavenly planets. The inhabitants of Gandharva Loka began to dance and sing, while great sages and the inhabitants of Charana Loka and Siddha Loka offered prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Purushottama. Texts 3 and 4. The best of the Gandharvas, King Huhu, having been cursed by Devala Muni, had become a crocodile. Now, having been delivered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he assumed a very beautiful form as a Gandharva. Understanding by whose mercy this had happened, he immediately offered his respectful obeisances with his head and began chanting prayers just suitable for the Transcendental Lord, the Supreme Eternal, who is worshipped by the choicest verses. Purport. The story of how the Gandharva had become a crocodile will be described later. The curse by which the Gandharva took this position was actually a blessing, not a curse. One should not be displeased when a saintly person curses someone, for his curse, indirectly, is a blessing. The Gandharva had the mentality of an inhabitant of the celestial planetary system, and for him to become an associate of the Supreme Lord would have taken millions of long years. However, because he was cursed by Devala Rishi, he became a crocodile, and in only one life was fortunate enough to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face and be promoted to the spiritual world to become one of the Lord's associates. Similarly, Gajendra was also delivered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead when he was freed from the curse of Agastya Muni. Text 5. Having been favored by the causeless mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and having regained his original form, King Huhu circumambulated the Lord and offered his obeisances. Then, in the presence of all the demigods, headed by Brahma, he returned to Gandharvaloka. He had been freed of all sinful reactions. Text 6. Because Gajendra, king of the elephants, had been touched directly by the hands of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he was immediately freed of all material ignorance and bondage. Thus he received the salvation of Sarupya Mukti, in which he achieved the same bodily features as the Lord, being dressed in yellow garments and possessing 4 hands. Purport. If one is favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by having his gross body touched by the Lord, his body turns into a spiritual body, and he can go back home, back to Godhead. Gajendra assumed a spiritual body when his body was touched by the Lord. Similarly, Dhruva Maharaj assumed his spiritual body in this way. Archana Padati, daily worship of the deity, provides an opportunity to touch the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus it enables one to be fortunate enough to get a spiritual body and go back home, back to Godhead. Not only by touching the body of the Supreme Lord, but simply by hearing about his pastimes, chanting his glories, touching his feet, and offering worship. In other words, by serving the Lord somehow or other, one is purified of material contamination. This is the result of touching the Supreme Lord. One who is a pure devotee, Anyabhilashita Shunyam, who acts according to the Shastra and the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, certainly becomes purified. Like Gajendra, he assumes a spiritual body and returns home, back to Godhead. Text 7. This Gajendra had formerly been a Vaishnava and the king of the country known as Pandya, which is in the province of Dravida, South India. In his previous life, he was known as Indradyumna Maharaj. Text 8. Indradyumna Maharaj retired from family life and went to the Himalaya hills, where he had a small cottage for his ashram. He wore matted locks on his head and always engaged in austerities. He wore matted locks on his head and always engaged in austerities. Once, while observing a vow of silence, he was fully engaged in the worship of the Lord and absorbed in the ecstasy of love of Godhead. Text 9. While Indradyumna Maharaj was engaged in ecstatic meditation, worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the great sage Agastya Muni arrived there, surrounded by his disciples. When the Muni saw that Maharaj Indradyumna, who was sitting in a secluded place, remained silent and did not follow the etiquette of offering him a reception, he was very angry. Text 10. Agastya Muni then spoke this curse against the king. This king Indradyumna is not at all gentle. Being low and uneducated, he has insulted a Brahmana. May he therefore enter the region of darkness and receive the dull, dumb body of an elephant. Purport. An elephant is very strong. It has a very big body, and it can work very hard and eat a large quantity of food. But its intelligence is not at all commensurate with its size and strength. Thus, in spite of so much bodily strength, the elephant works as a menial servant for a human being. Agastya Muni thought it wise to curse the king to become an elephant, because the powerful king did not receive Agastya Muni as one is obliged to receive a Brahmana. Yet although Agastya Muni cursed Maharaj Indradyumna to become an elephant, the curse was indirectly a benediction. For by undergoing one life as an elephant, Indradyumna Maharaj ended the reactions for all the sins of his previous life. Immediately after the expiry of the elephant's life, he was promoted to Vaikuntha Loka to become a personal associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, in a body exactly like that of the Lord. This is called Sarupya Mukti. Text 11 and 12. Shukadeva Goswami continued, My dear king, after Agastya Muni had thus cursed the king Indradyumna, the Muni left that place along with his disciples. Since the king was a devotee, he accepted Agastya Muni's curse as welcome, because it was the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, although in his next life he got the body of an elephant, because of devotional service, he remembered how to worship and offer prayers to the Lord. Purport. This is a unique position of a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although the king was cursed, he welcomed the curse because a devotee is always aware that nothing can happen without the desire of the Supreme Lord. Although the king was not at fault, Agastya Muni cursed him, and when this happened, the king considered it to be due to his past misdeeds. Tat tenukampam susamikshamana. Bhagavatam 10:14-8. This is a practical example of how a devotee thinks. I'll repeat this again. This is a practical example of how a devotee thinks. He regards any reverses in life as blessings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, instead of being agitated by such reverses, he continues his activities of devotional service, and Krishna takes care of him and enables him to be promoted to the spiritual world, back to Godhead. If a devotee has to suffer the reactions of his past misdeeds, the Supreme Lord arranges for him to be given only a token of these reactions. And very soon, he is freed from all the reactions of material contamination. One should therefore adhere to devotional service, and the Lord himself will very soon see to one's promotion to the spiritual world. A devotee should not be disturbed by unfortunate circumstances, but must continue his regular program, depending on the Lord for everything. The word upadarayan, considering, is very significant in this verse. The word upadarayam, this word indicates that a devotee knows what is what. He understands what is happening in material, conditional life. Text 13. Upon delivering the king of the elephants from the clutches of the crocodile and from material existence, which resembles a crocodile, the Lord awarded him the status of Sarupya Mukti. In the presence of the Gandharvas, the Siddhas, and the other demigods who were praising the Lord for his wonderful transcendental activities, the Lord, sitting on the back of his carrier, Garuda, returned to his all-wonderful abode and took Gajendra with him. Purport. In this verse, the word vimoksha is significant. For a devotee, moksha, or mukti, salvation, means getting the position of the Lord's associate. The impersonalists are satisfied to get the liberation of merging in the Brahman effulgence, but for a devotee, mukti, liberation, means not to merge into the effulgence of the Lord, but to be directly promoted to the Vaikuntha planets and to become an associate of the Lord. In this regard, there is a relevant verse in Srimad-Bhagavatam 10.14.8. Tattenu kampam susamikshamano bunjana evatmakritam vipakam ridbhag vapurvir badadam nimaste jivet-yo muktipade siddhaya bhak. One who seeks your compassion and thus tolerates all kinds of adverse conditions due to the karma of his past deeds, who engages always in your devotional service with his mind, words, and body, and who always offers obeisances unto you, is certainly a bona fide candidate for liberation. A devotee who tolerates everything in this material world and patiently executes his devotional service can become Mukti Padi Siddhaya Bhak, a bona fide candidate for liberation. The word Daya Bhak refers to a hereditary right to the Lord's mercy. A devotee must simply engage in devotional service, not caring about material situations. Then he automatically becomes a rightful candidate for promotion to Vaikuntha Loka. The devotee who renders unalloyed service to the Lord gets the right to be promoted to Vaikuntha Loka, just as a son inherits the property of his father. When a devotee gets liberation, he becomes free from material contamination and engages as a servant of the Lord. This is explained in Srimad-Bhagavatam 2.10.6. Muktir hit vanyata rupam sarupena vivastitihi. The word sarupa refers to sarupya mukti, going back home, back to Godhead, and remaining the Lord's eternal associate, having regained a spiritual body exactly resembling that of the Lord, with 4 hands, holding the Shankh, Chakra, Gadha, and Padma. The difference between the mukti of the impersonalist and that of the devotee is that the devotee is immediately appointed an eternal servant of the Lord, whereas the impersonalist, although merging in the effulgence of the Brahmajyoti, is still insecure and therefore generally falls again to this material world. Aruya krich trena padam padam tatat padantyado nadvita yushpad angrayaha. Aruya krich Bhagavatam 10.2.32. Although the impersonalist rises to the Brahman effulgence and enters into that effulgence, he has no engagement in the service of the Lord, and therefore he is again attracted to materialistic philanthropic activities. Thus he comes down to open hospitals and educational institutions, feed the poor men, and perform similar materialistic activities, which the impersonalist thinks are more precious than serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anadrita Yushmad Angrayaha. The impersonalists do not think that the service of the Lord is more valuable than serving the poor man or starting a school or hospital. Although they say Brahma Satyam Jagan Mitya, Brahman is real and the material world is false, they are nonetheless very eager to serve the false material world and neglect the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 14. My dear King Parikshit, I have now described the wonderful power of Krishna as displayed when the Lord delivered the king of the elephants. O best of the Kuru dynasty, those who hear this narration become fit to be promoted to the higher planetary systems. Simply because of hearing this narration, they gain a reputation as devotees. They are unaffected by the contamination of Kali Yuga, and they never see bad dreams. Text 15. Therefore, after getting up from bed in the morning, those who desire their own welfare, especially the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and in particular the Brahmana Vaishnavas, should chant this narration as it is, without deviation, to counteract the troubles of bad dreams. Purport. Every verse in the Vedic literature, especially in the Srimad-Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, is a Vedic mantra. Here the words yata nukirtayanti are used to recommend that this literature be presented as it is. Unscrupulous persons, however, deviate from the actual narration and interpret the text in their own way with grammatical jugglery. Such deviations are to be avoided. This is a Vedic injunction supported by Shukadeva Goswami, one of the Mahajans, or authorities. He says, yata nukirtayanti. One should recite the mantra as it is, without deviation, for then one will be eligible to rise to the platform of all good fortune. Shukadeva Goswami especially recommends that those who are Brahmanas, Shuchaya, recite all these mantras after rising from bed in the morning. Because of sinful activities, at night we have bad dreams, which are very troublesome. Indeed, Maharaj Yudhishthira was obliged to see hell because of a slight deviation from devotional service to the Lord. Therefore, dushwapna, bad dreams, occur because of sinful activities. A devotee sometimes accepts a sinful person as his disciple, and to counteract the sinful reactions he accepts from the disciple, he has to see a bad dream. Nonetheless, the spiritual master is so kind that in spite of having bad dreams due to the sinful disciple, he accepts this troublesome business for the deliverance of the victims of Kali Yuga. After initiation, therefore, a disciple should be extremely careful not to commit again any sinful act that might cause difficulties for himself and the spiritual master. Before the deity, before the fire, before the spiritual master, and before the Vaishnavas, the honest disciple promises to refrain from all sinful activity. Therefore he must not again commit sinful acts and thus create a troublesome situation. Text 16. O best of the Kuru dynasty, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul of everyone, being thus pleased, addressed Gajendra in the presence of everyone there. He spoke the following blessings. 17 to 24. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, freed from all sinful reactions are those who rise from bed at the end of night, early in the morning, and fully concentrate their minds with great attention upon my form, your form, this lake, this mountain, the caves, the gardens, the cane plants, the bamboo plants, the celestial trees, the residential quarters of me, Lord Brahma, and Lord Shiva, the 3 peaks of Trikuta mountain made of gold, silver, and iron, my very pleasing abode, the ocean of milk, the white island, Shwetadweep, which is always brilliant with spiritual rays. My mark of Shrivats, the Kaustuva gem, my Vaijayanti garland, my club, Kamodaki, my Sudarshan disc, and the Panchajanya conch shell, my bearer, Garuda, the king of birds, my bed, Sheshanaga, my expansion of energy of the goddess of fortune, Lord Brahma, Narada Muni, Lord Shiva, Prahlad, my incarnations like Matsya, Kurma, and Varaha, my unlimited, all auspicious activity, which yield piety to him who hears them, the sun, the moon, fire, the mantra Omkara, the absolute truth, the total material energy, the cows and brahmanas, devotional service, the wives of Soma and Kashyapa, who were all daughters of King Daksha, the rivers Ganges, Saraswati, Nanda, and Yamuna, Kalindi, the elephant Airavata, Dhruva Maharaj, the 7 rishis, and the pious human beings. Text 25. My dear devotee, unto those who rise from bed at the end of night and offer me the prayers offered by you, I give an eternal residence in the spiritual world at the end of their lives. Text 26. Shukadev Goswami continued, after hearing this instruction, the Lord, who is known as Rishikesha, bugled with his Panchajanya conch shell, in this way pleasing all the demigods, headed by Lord Brahma. Then he mounted the back of his carrier, Garuda. Thus, and the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 8th canto, 4th chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Gajendra Returns to the Spiritual World. Haribo. Chapter 5. The demigods appeal to the Lord for protection. This chapter describes the 5th and 6th Manus. It also describes the prayers of the demigods and the curse of Durvasa Muni. The mother of Tamasa, the 4th Manu, who has previously been described, was the 5th Manu, Revata. The sons of Revata included Arjuna, Bali, and Bindya. During the reign of this Manu, Indra, the king of heaven, was known as Bibhu. Among the demigods were the Bhuttarayas, and among the 7 rishis were Hiranyaroma, Vedashira, and Urdhvabahu. The rishi known as Shubra by his wife, Vikunta, gave birth to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vaikunta. This Supreme Personality of Godhead manifested a Vaikunta planet at the request of Ramadevi. His power and activities are mentioned in the 3rd canto. The 6th Manu was Chakshusha, the son of Chakshumanu. Among the sons of the 6th Manu were Puru, Purusha, and Sujumna. During the reign of this Manu, Mantraduma was Indra, the king of the heavenly planets. Among the demigods were the Apyas, and among the 7 rishis were Havishman and Viraga. The wife of Vairaja, whose name was Devasambhuti, gave birth to Ajita, an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This Ajita, taking the shape of a tortoise and holding the mountain known as Mandara on his back, turned the ocean and produced nectar for the demigods. Maharaj Parikshit was very eager to hear about the churning of the ocean, and therefore Shukadev Goswami began to explain to him how the demigods, having been cursed by Durvasa Muni, were defeated in battle by the Asuras. When the demigods were deprived of their heavenly kingdom, they went to the assembly house of Lord Brahma and informed Lord Brahma of what had happened. Then Brahma, along with all the demigods, went to the shore of the ocean of milk and offered prayers to Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. Text 1. Shukadev Goswami continued, O king, I have described to you the pastime of Gajendra Mokshana, which is most pious to hear. By hearing such activities of the Lord, one can be freed from all sinful reactions. Now please listen as I describe Raivata Manu. Text 2. The brother of Tamasa Muni was the fifth Manu, named Raivata. His sons were headed by Arjuna, Bali, and Vindhya. Text 3. O king, in the millennium of Raivata Manu, the king of heaven was known as Vibhu. Among the demigods were the Bhuttarayas, and among the 7 Brahmanas who occupied the 7 planets were Hiranyaroma, Vedashira, and Urdhvabahu. Text 4. From the combination of Shubhra and his wife, Vikunta, there appeared the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vaikunta, along with demigods who were his personal plenary expansions. Text 5. Just to please the goddess of fortune, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vaikunta, at her request, created another Vaikunta planet, which is worshipped by everyone. Purport. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur remarks here that this Vaikunta planet, like Srimad-Bhagavatam, appears and is said to be born or created, but both Srimad-Bhagavatam and Vaikunta eternally exist beyond the material universes, which are enveloped by 8 kinds of coverings. There's the direct evidence that Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu pointed out to us in the Tattva Sandarbha while I was helping him to edit that book, wherein Jiva Goswami said that the Bhagavatam is actually Shruti. It's actually an eternal sound, never changes. Here's the direct evidence. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks here that this Vaikunta planet, like Srimad Bhagavatam, appears and is said to be born or created, but both Srimad Bhagavatam and Vaikunta eternally exist beyond the material universes, which are enveloped by 8 kinds of coverings. So the Shruti and Krishna are co-eternal. As described in the 2nd canto, Lord Brahma saw Vaikunta before the creation of the universe. Vira Raghava Acharya mentions that this Vaikunta is within the universe. It is situated above the mountain known as Loka Loka. This planet is worshipped by everyone. Text 6. Although the great activities and transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's various incarnations are wonderfully described, sometimes we are unable to understand them. Yet everything is possible for Lord Vishnu. If one could count the atoms of the universe, then he could count the qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But no one can count the atoms of the universe, nor can anyone count the transcendental qualities of the Lord. Purport. The Lord's glorious activities referred to in this connection took place after his personal bodyguards, Jai and Vijay, became Daityas, having been cursed by the great sages Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumara. Jaya, as Hiranyaksha, had to fight with Varahadev, and that same Varahadev is mentioned in regard to the Raivata millennium. The fighting, however, took place during the reign of the first Manu, Swayambhuva. Therefore, according to some authorities, there are 2 Varahas. According to others, however, Varaha appeared during the regime of Swayambhuva Manu and stayed in the water until that of Raivata Manu. Some may doubt that this could be possible, but the answer is that everything is possible. If one could count the atoms within the universe, one could count the qualities of Lord Vishnu. But the atoms of the universe are impossible for anyone to count, and similarly, no one can count the transcendental qualities of the Lord. Text 7. The son of Chakshu, known as Chakshusha, was the sixth Manu. He had many sons headed by Puru, Purusha, and Sujumna. Text 8. During the reign of Chakshusha Manu, the king of heaven was known as Mantradruma. Among the demigods were the Apyas, and among the great sages were Havishman and Viraka. Text 9. In this sixth Manvantara millennium, Lord Vishnu, the master of the universe, appeared in his partial expansion. He was begotten by Raja in the womb of his wife, Devasambhuti, and his name was Ajita. Text 10. By churning the ocean of milk, Ajita produced nectar for the demigods. In the form of a tortoise, he moved here and there, carrying on his back the great mountain known as Mandara. Text 11 and 12. King Parikshit inquired, O great Brahmana, Shukadev Goswami, why and how did Lord Vishnu churn the ocean of milk? For what reason did he stay in the water as a tortoise and hold up Mandara mountain? How did the demigods obtain the nectar? And what other things were produced from the churning of the ocean? Kindly describe all these wonderful activities of the Lord. Text 13. My heart, which is disturbed by the three miserable conditions of material life, is not yet sated with hearing you describe the glorious activities of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Master of the devotees. Text 14. Sri Sutta Goswami said, O learned Brahmanas, assembled here at Naimisharanya, when Shukadev Goswami, the son of Dvaipayana, was thus questioned by the king, he congratulated the king, and then endeavored to describe further the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Texts 15 and 16. Shukadev Goswami said, when the Asuras, with their serpent weapons, severely attacked the demigods in a fight, many of the demigods fell and lost their lives. Indeed, they could not be revived. At that time, O king, the demigods had been cursed by Durvasa Muni. The three worlds were poverty-stricken, and therefore ritualistic ceremonies could not be performed. The effects of this were very serious. Purport. It is described that while Durvasa Muni was passing on the road, he saw Indra on the back of his elephant, and was pleased to offer Indra a garland from his own neck. Indra, however, being too puffed up, took the garland, and without respect for Durvasa Muni, he placed it on the trunk of his carrier elephant. The elephant, being an animal, could not understand the value of the garland, and thus the elephant threw the garland between its legs and smashed it. Seeing this insulting behavior, Durvasa Muni immediately cursed Indra to be poverty-stricken, bereft of all material opulence. Thus the demigods, afflicted on one side by the fighting demons and on the other by the curse of Durvasa Muni, lost all the material opulences in the three worlds. To be extremely opulent in materialistic advancement is sometimes very risky. The materially opulent person does not care about anyone, and thus he commits offenses to great personalities, such as devotees and great saints. This is the way of material opulence. as described by Shukadev Goswami, Dhan dur madanda, too much wealth makes one blind. This happens even to Indra in his heavenly kingdom, and what to speak of others in this material world. When one is materially opulent, he should learn to be sober and well behaved toward Vaishnavas and saintly persons. Otherwise, he will fall down. Text 17 and 18. Lord Indra, Varuna, and the other demigods, seeing their lives in such a state, consulted among themselves, but they could not find any solution. Then all the demigods assembled and went together to the peak of Sumera mountain. There in the assembly of Lord Brahma, they fell down to offer Lord Brahma their obeisances, and then they informed him of all the incidents that had taken place. Text 19 and 20. Upon seeing that the demigods were bereft of all influence and strength, and that the three worlds were consequently devoid of auspiciousness, and upon seeing that the demigods were in an awkward position, whereas all the demons were flourishing, Lord Brahma, who was above all the demigods and who was most powerful, concentrated his mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, being encouraged, he became bright-faced and spoke to the demigods as follows. Purport. After hearing from the demigods the real situation, Lord Brahma was very much concerned because the demons were unnecessarily so powerful. When demons become powerful, the entire world is placed in an awkward position because demons are simply interested in their own sense gratification and not in the welfare of the world. Demigods or devotees, however, are concerned with the welfare of all living beings. Srila Rupa Goswami, for example, left his ministership and went to Vrindavan for the benefit of the entire world. Lokanam hitakarinau. This is the nature of a saintly person or demigod. Even impersonalists think of the welfare of all people. Thus Brahma was very much concerned at seeing the demons in power. 5:30 exactly, we'll stop here. Hare Krishna. Tonight's reading, and we will begin our open mic session. Anybody who heard something that stuck in the mind and might want to reflect on or discuss further or question, please be our guest.
We've got a few here.
Please.
Prabhupada Priya Devi Das first.
Prabhupada Priya. Hare Krishna. She's at Krishna House.
Question.
We met in 1990 in London. She was on her way to get her PhD in Harvard University in some kind of, well, she can correct me if I'm wrong, but some kind of environmental or, studies. And I talked her out of it. And now she's the ashram leader in Krishna House. And very competent person, super competent. She was the teacher of the older girls in Mayapur for many years. And extremely learned, extremely intelligent, and gifted. Okay, now that I've embarrassed you completely, luckily you're not in the room so everybody can see you, but there you are. It's my nature, I can't help it. Got to glorify the devotees.
Okay. Question. How do we get a spiritual body? Is it provided to us as we leave our material bodies on the way back to Godhead? Or is the spiritual body non-different from the soul itself, as Krishna's body is non-different from himself? If the latter is the case, is the spiritual body already there in our hearts with the soul?
Absolutely. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, "Abhinashi tuta bini yena sarvamidam tatam vinasham abhyasyasya nakachchit kartam arati." Somebody knows what that means? It means that the soul is unchangeable, eternal. It's the soul, when it comes into the material world, the spiritual form of the soul becomes very tiny. It's an atomized form, but it's still a form. And the evidence of that is that we can see and taste and hear and smell and touch. Because the senses that we think that we're doing that through are what? Anybody? A guess in the dark? Inert. The eyes, the senses, the nose, the tongue, the ears. All of our senses are inert, materially. So it's not possible actually to see through them. The light goes through, and there's a process by which it reaches the soul, but it's the senses of the soul that actually allow us to hear, to see, to smell, to taste. This is direct evidence that the spiritual soul has a form. And it's described in many places, in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, in Bhagavatam, everywhere it's described, that the soul has a form. It's very small, 1/10,000th the tip of a hair. So it's like an atomic particle, but has a form. Just like when the scientists go deeper and deeper into matter, and they see the atomic particles or subparticles, they see form. They don't see nothing. So if they were able to go, you can't see the form of the soul with the material senses. Because it's spiritual, and the material senses are material. You can't actually see. Even the senses, even the scientists can't see directly the atom, but they see a trace. They'll have some gas or something, and then they'll shoot something through, and they'll see it, the trace of it going through, and they'll accept it as being true because they see the symptom of it. So the symptom that the soul has a form and that it can see, hear, cut, and all those things is consciousness. The soul is emanating consciousness to all the parts of the body. Yes, please.
Does every soul have the same shape?
No, each soul has its own shape. Every single soul is different. Just like all of our bodies are different, you never see a form the same. Isn't that mystical? Have you ever noticed? Every single form, every single sentient being in each species is different from the others. Every single one. So why? Because each soul is different.
Even though it's so small.
Yes. It has the form. And when the soul leaves the material world and goes back to the spiritual world, Prabhupada describes it to be like, of course this is a gross example, this is just a gross example, but like a sponge. When a sponge is all dried up, sometimes it'll become really tiny, and you put water in it and it goes like that. It has a bigger form. So when the soul leaves the spiritual world, it resumes its original form. In the spiritual world, there is no soul proper inside the body that's operating the body. In the spiritual world, the body and the soul are the same. Therefore, it's said in the purport that we just read that the soul in liberated condition in the spiritual world gets a body of the same quality as Krishna. That's what it means. To get a body the same quality as Krishna means you get a spiritual body. And just as Krishna's body is not different from him, so the individual soul, when it's in the spiritual world associating with Krishna, has a form that is the same as him. All glories to the Vedas.
Hannah Gill has another question.
Who?
Or Hannah Gill has a question.
Hannah Gill has a question. Okay,
Yes.
shoot.
Is a devotee on earth more secure than an impersonalist who merges into Krishna's effulgence?
Well, when the soul is in the material world, at least the soul has an opportunity to hear about the personality of Godhead and his pastimes and decide to engage in devotional service. But when the soul is in the impersonal effulgence, his form is not developed, and therefore he doesn't feel like acting. But the tendency to act is there. So therefore that natural, dormant tendency for the soul to act, that's called chit. When we had, I think we mentioned this before, when was it, the other day or two ago, that the spiritual form of Krishna is Satchidananda. And all the forms of the spiritual world are formed of Satchidananda. Just like here we have goodness, passion, and ignorance. And all the forms are created of combinations, permutations and combinations of those three modes. Goodness, passion, and ignorance. They combine together to create all the forms that we can see, and taste, and smell, and touch. So in the spiritual world, there are also forms, but they are made of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. There's no goodness, passion, and ignorance. And when that Sat, Chit, and Ananda form enters into the material world in an atomized state, and the consciousness that's coming from the soul comes through goodness, passion, and ignorance, then we have a tendency to enjoy different things in different ways. We have a tendency to be happy different ways with different things. We understand the world in different ways, etc., etc. This is all described in the Gita, in the 17th, 18th chapters of the Gita and 14th chapters of the Gita. So, the soul when the soul is in the Brahma Jyoti, he's in a liberated condition because he's no longer constrained by goodness, passion, and ignorance. But because he's in an interim state, he doesn't have the full, manifestation of his being is not manifested. Only the eternal aspect, the aspect in which one has a sense that one is eternal. And there's pleasure that comes from that. There's freedom from the anxieties of this material world. Therefore, Krishna says, Brahmano hi pratishtaham amya. It means the amrita, the nectar, the basic principle of it is Brahman. Because it's eternal. There's a sense that we're eternal. Just like a Brahman realized soul here in the material world has a sense that they're eternal. They're conscious that they're eternal. And therefore they become free from fear. Before you become conscious that you're eternal, then you're fearful. Everyone in the material world. So in that sense, a person in the spiritual world is in a better position. But in another sense, the soul in the material world conditioned is in a better position. Because he can be in the place where Krishna comes personally and all his incarnations come personally and exhibits the power of the spiritual world and gives the soul an opportunity to engage in devotional service. Therefore the soul comes down from the Brahma Jyoti into the material world to engage in activity, to re-engage in activity. And if the soul is still in the material world but Brahman realized and does not eventually perform devotional service and come in contact with the spiritual form of Krishna and engage in loving service with Krishna, then that Brahman realized soul will again, and we heard it already in one of the purports, it'll again try to engage in opening hospitals, feeding the poor, and doing philanthropic work, which is material. It's not impossible for the soul to go from the spiritual Brahmajyoti to the Vaikuntha planets, but it's rare. Generally, they come to the material world, and then from the material world go back to the spiritual world. I don't know if that answers the question. I'm trying. This is what I know. The only thing I know, what I just said. So there's a sense. You see, when we try to make hard and fast rules for everybody, it doesn't work because every single person's different. Even in the Brahmajyoti, every people are different. They're different. The souls are different. Everyone. So some may have a tendency to come down, and some may have a tendency to stay there. Some may have a tendency to go back to the spiritual world. But it's more difficult to go from the spiritual world there because there's no form to act or do anything with to serve the Lord. There's no tendency to do that. I mean, there's a dormant tendency. When Gopakumar left the material world and went to Mahakalapur, the abode of liberation is called Mahakalapur. And there, the effulgence is there. And Gopakumar was going from one place to another, trying to find where Gopal was, because he was a cowherd boy born in Govardhan. And Guru there, and his Guru gave him the benediction that he was a boy, he was like 10 years old, and he gave him the benediction that he could satisfy his childish curiosity to go wherever and do whatever he wanted by chanting the mantra that the Guru gave him. So every time he would go to a place, he would see that that place wasn't really where he belonged because he was very advanced, but he still wasn't educated because he was a young boy. So he got educated by the grace of his spiritual master as he was traveling around the different places and meeting all kinds of different devotees and seeing different realms and the devotional service that were going on in those different realms, and he was becoming educated. So in the process of doing that, he finally reached the Mahakalapur, the Brahmajyoti. And there it's described that he saw the Brahman effulgence and he became attracted to it. But then in his heart, he didn't like it. And as he became closer to it, he saw the form. In Hiranyamayarena Patrena, in the Ishopanishad, you know that verse? In the Ishopanishad, there's a verse that says, "Please remove the effulgence so that I can see your form of bliss and knowledge." So there's a form that actually the deity of the Brahmajyoti is there in Mahakalapur. He's Mahakala. And if you get closer, you want to merge into him. But then, if your devotional service is strong enough, then you don't feel like that. So Gopakumar felt himself being drawn into that form, and then no, and they would come out. And he'd be grown, and then no, and he would come out. And this went on for some time, until finally he didn't want that. And then he became released. And he met with Lord Shiva, and he met the Vaikuntha Dutas, who were coming from Vaikuntha, and he got instructions on Prem Sankirtan, on chanting the holy name with pure devotion rather than just formally. And from there he went, from there he made it to Vaikuntha, and then eventually went back to Govardhan on earth, and then he went back to Goloka Vrindavan. So that's just a little discussion about the Brahmajyoti in the spiritual sky, and how a person would experience it without merging into it.
There's a few more questions on here.
Go ahead.
For one, Tamal Gopal said Hare Krishna as well.
Tamal Gopal, where are you? You're supposed to be here.
And then Hannah Gill has a couple more questions. One, it might just be a comment. How is it that Srila Prabhupada and Krishna wrote this book together simultaneously?
Well, Srila Prabhupada is a transparent Vidya medium, and therefore he can hear everything. Just like we may sit in here, and we heard in one of the purports that when one hears properly, actually hears, then one becomes bright-faced. One lights up, and one becomes happy and awake, and one cannot contain that happiness. So, Srila Prabhupada, the liberated soul, and so because his consciousness is completely pure, when he hears, he can hear more than ordinary person. When he speaks it, when he repeats it, it sounds different. Even when he translates it from the original to the English, the effect of the sound is different. And that's why I have made a vow for the rest of my life to read the sound of Srila Prabhupada's English translation and purport substantially every day for the rest of my life. Because I know I've seen with my own eyes that devotees who are awake, who can hear, because everyone can hear to a different degree. Not everyone hears to the same degree. But when you're actually hearing, when your heart is submissive, and you don't have doubts, and you don't have arguments, and you have faith in the person who's speaking, and in this case, it's Prabhupada, and that's why I have made my vow to do this, because I know in the material world it's hard to have faith, in anyone. What to speak of me, imperfect soul. But if I repeat what Prabhupada said with conviction and with full faith and without argument, then the effect is there. If the receiver is there, the effect is there. So then when it came time for Prabhupada to comment, he looked at all the commentaries of all the previous acharyas. Because you asked Tamal, how is it Prabhupada wrote these books?
Oh, this was Hannah's.
Oh, I thought it was Tamal. But
Yeah, Tamal just commented Hare Krishna. Hannah.
oh, thanks a lot. I mean, try to read what's actually there and tell me, because that's. Anyway, it's the same. I'm talking. Okay, Hannah, I'm trying to explain it. So, the more doubt there is in the heart, then the less you'll taste. The less you'll wake up. When one becomes free from offenses and free from doubt, and one has full faith, then when the sound of Srila Prabhupada's translations and purports enter the ear, it wakes us up. So that's how he writes the books. And then on top of all that, then he puts his own commentary realizations, because he is a Shaktivesh avatar. He's an empowered personality. And so he, with his own realization of what he sees and what is needed to explain everything, what to do, how to think, how to feel, how to will, how to act in pure devotional service, then he puts his own realization on that also. And even if he didn't, his consciousness carries something. His consciousness carries the sound amplifies it, if you will, or not in the sense of make it louder, but makes it more clear, strengthens it, so that one can hear easier. You know, when Prabhupada was here, when he would say, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you would just get it. Yeah, that's right. Especially when we first started hearing from him, because we were innocent. And we heard that, so we didn't have any doubts. We're not like in India, everybody knows everything. They know all Bhagavad Gita, philosophy of the Vedas, Upanishads, and everybody's chanting Sanskrit, and they can't hear anything. Sometimes you hear somebody knows a lot of Sanskrit, but when you hear him talk, you can't understand anything about what you're supposed to do, or how you're supposed to think, or anything. Hare Krishna. Haribol. But when a person, even if a person is not so elevated in terms of spiritual Sanskrit knowledge and grammar and all those things, but if a person has heard from Prabhupada and is willing to repeat it, without changing the concepts, then the sound, it has potency and it moves the heart. It wakes up the soul. So to the extent that one is eager to know, is eager to hear, then to that degree, and to the extent that one hears from Prabhupada, then the soul wakes up.
Got some more questions.
Please. This is more questions than we've had in a long time. Relieving you guys of having to figure out what to say, to ask a question, right? Go ahead.
Katie Romai.
Katie Romai.
Maharaj, I have a question too. I've heard that in the spiritual world everyone is a woman and only Krishna is a man. Is that possible, or is that statement wrong? Because I'm kind of wondering.
How boring. How boring if in the spiritual world everyone was a woman. We can talk to the women openly. Would it be boring if there was only women there? You bet. Or if there were only men there? Or if there was just Krishna and gopis? Who told you that? Whoever told you that, you should stop hearing from them. Whoever told you that, you should stop hearing from that person at all. You may want to smile, and you may want to do pranam or offer your respects, but close your ears, please. Now, there is a sense in which all living beings are female, but that doesn't mean they have female forms, but they are the energy of Krishna. The energy of Krishna is called Prakriti. Krishna is the Purusha. He's the energetic source. And the energy is called Prakriti. So in that sense, everyone is subordinate to the Lord. Purusha and Prakriti. So, but in the material world, whether we have a female or a male form, if we are trying to enjoy as if we were Purusha, the enjoyer, then we are called Purusha. But we are actually Prakriti. We are actually meant to be enjoyed by the Lord, and that is our original position. And if we agree to do that and become His eternal servant, consciously and practically, then we become properly situated as the internal potency. But in the spiritual world, it's not that everybody has a female form. That's not right. We hear it. We hear it every day in the Bhagavatam class. You hear how when somebody asks me that question, I tell everybody in the audience, now try to visualize the spiritual world as just being Krishna and gopis, and that's it. There's nothing else. Because these people who have this philosophy, they're thinking, oh yes, Gopi Bhava. Krishna enjoys more with the gopis than anyone else, and it's superior. This is only an analytical study. This is not to mean that they're superior. They're not superior, they're different. Well, there's a sense in which they're superior. But imagine if there were just Krishna and the gopis, how much pleasure would the gopis and Krishna have if there were no cowherd boys in forest of Vrindavan and the river Yamuna, and the birds and the deer and the nilgaya and blue deer and all these cows and calves. That's the spiritual world. There's variety in the spiritual world. Unlimited variety. More variety than there is here. So whoever told you that in the spiritual world there's only women, you should stop talking to that person. I'm hoping I'm not being too harsh. I made a vow when I took sannyas to tell the truth, so I always tell the truth, no matter what. Forgive me. May the Lord forgive me. Hare Krishna. Okay, go ahead.
Hannah Gill has another question. I have always wondered this, but in chapter 5 in particular, we heard many different spiritual names of the Lord and his devotees. Is there a reason devotees are given certain spiritual names?
You heard in chapter 5 that there's so many spiritual names. Well, the names of the devotees have to do with Krishna's pastimes. The Lord has unlimited pastimes, unlimited. And his names indicate his qualities or his pastimes or his potencies. So therefore, all the devotees' names mean a servant of one of Krishna in one of his pastimes. In India, everybody gets a name of Krishna, practically, right? Just like here, the tendency is to get a name of Jesus Christ or one of his disciples, John, Thomas, Judas. Judas came in the other day, right? Tendency. And then, of course, as the materialistic civilization goes farther and farther away from the spiritual, then they make up names. Like now they have icicle, popsicle, joy, cloud. There was one person whose first name was Pepsi, and second name was can't remember. They got won something, and the first name was Pepsi, and the second name was some other eating product. And they were trying to force her to change her name, but she didn't do it. And she won some, event or something. So the closer we come to Krishna, the more we come into a place where the devotees' names are connected with Krishna.
Vijay Lakshmi left a medical comment.
Vijay Lakshmi left a medical comment.
Okay. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
As a gynecologist, we are all born as females, but the presence of a factor determines whether we remain a female or get differentiated into a male.
Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Haribol. We will stop here. We have a meeting at 6 o'clock, and we're past 6, so I'm late for my meeting. So thank you so much for those lovely questions out there in cyberspace. Keep those questions and letter cards and letters coming in. We need all those things to help us understand deeper and deeper the science of Krishna consciousness. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, 4:30 Central Time, USA. Hare Krishna.